Good afternoon, my name is Gillian Bangert, and I am working under Dr. Kelsey West and Brianna Keller in the Bama Baby Lab, and my research is on understanding medical play in autistic and non-autistic preschoolers. For a bit of a project overview, we will be going over some background information and terminology, then moving into our research objectives, then finally going into the methodology and analysis. First, it is important to define what autism spectrum disorder is. Autism is a kind of neurodivergence that influences how someone interacts and experiences the world. It can have influences on how they communicate, whether that looks like perceiving tone or body language differently. They may have intense fixations and hyper-focused interests, as well as repetitive behaviors. They may have differences in sensory processing, as well as how they socialize. But of course, this can look different for lots of individuals because autism is a spectrum. In contrast, neurotypical is a non-medical term that is used to describe a person whose brain develops like the majority of the populations does. For both autistic and non-autistic children, play is one of the main ways that they learn. Imaginative play specifically, also known as pretend play or make-believe, can look different if a child has autism. First, these children may engage in less imaginative play as a whole because it involves more symbolic thinking rather than literal thinking. Additionally, they may initiate social engagement less frequently than their neurotypical peers, and they may use less expressive language as they play, so they may not be narrating how the play is making them feel, and again, they may have those hyperfixations on specific toys. However, there have been varying findings on how autistic and neurotypical children differ in their visual attention to both toys and faces. So visual attention is something like selective attention, or being able to attend to multiple visual inputs and going in between them. And there also have been differences in the findings on manual attention to toys, which is more that physical active playing with them. So a specific kind of imaginative play that we are looking at is medical play, which allows children to familiarize themselves with medical equipment and experiences, especially if they may be nervous about them. Medical play can look very different in different kinds of scenarios. So it may look like using a syringe to paint for an art project, or watching one of their favorite cartoon characters get a checkup at the doctor. In our lab, we are looking at medical play in an imaginative sense. So for our purposes, we're looking more at using a pretend doctor's kit for playing. But why is this so important to examine medical play and autism specifically? Upwards of 60% of autistic individuals have 2 or more co-occurring conditions in addition to their autism diagnosis. So this could be something like ADHD, having difficulties with sleeping, a learning disability, epilepsy, gastrointestinal issues, and more. And this increases their need for medical care more than the average individual. And these medical settings can have high processing demands and can lead to sensory overload. So if we are thinking about things like harsh lighting, or if they are in something like an MRI, which is very loud in a confined space, or even just being in a medical setting with lots of jargon throwing around, it can lead to that sensory overload. So this prompts some questions for us. Does playing with medical equipment look different for autistic and neurotypical children? As well as, how can parents scaffold their children's medical play? So how can they be supportive in familiarizing themselves with this medical equipment and scenarios? This leads me into our research aims. So our aims are to document patterns in autistic and neurotypical children's imaginative medical play, and this is in comparison to 2 other toy conditions. And then our eventual goals are to inform interventions that are aimed at reducing medical stress and anxiety for autistic children. So in terms of our methodology, we are looking at caregiver-child dyads playing together in 8-minute intervals in 3 different conditions as they normally would. And at the end of this, the parents will fill out a questionnaire that talks about their demographics, their child's verbal ability, how much their child enjoys specific toys or activities, their child's social responsiveness, as well as their child's self-expression. So our research in particular is utilizing head-mounted eye tracking devices. And this is important because previous eye tracking research done with autism has used screen-based eye tracking, which limits the findings to a specific screen for looking at where someone is looking and the duration of their looking periods. So when we're considering something like children's play, we obviously want it to be as organic as possible, and that involves movement, which is where the head-mounted eye tracking comes in. So our head-mounted eye tracking devices are wearable and portable, and as seen in the image on the right, they are worn like a pair of glasses. Each of these head-mounted eye tracking devices has 2 cameras. Camera 1, which is denoted by the orange arrow, is pointing at the eye, so it's seeing where that pupil is looking during play. And then camera 2, which is the scene camera, also denoted by the pink arrow, is more of a GoPro style camera that allows us to see where the child is looking. So here's a better image to get an idea of what the general scene looks like and what the eye and scene videos look like. So in the image on the right, this is the scene. The larger part of the image is the scene camera, and then the upper right-hand corner is the eye video. So we're able to sync these up and get an idea of where the children are looking as they're playing. So in terms of our data collection, we are looking to see how the head-mounted eye tracking records for both the eye and scene of the child and the caregiver. And in addition to this, we are using a hand camera to record external video and audio for us. And this is important, especially if we have non-compliance with wearing the eye tracker or if we have some sort of technical issue. But it also allows us to see a greater overview of what play is looking from an external perspective. So in our experiment, we have 3 different toy conditions. The first one is medical play, which we use a toy doctor's kit. The second is manipulatives, so for our purpose, we're using Magnetiles. And then we have a caregiving set. So we have a little baby doll, as well as like a bath time set and a feeding set that the children can play with. So for our experiment process, each of these conditions is played for in 8-minute intervals, and then we have a transition and cleanup time in between, as well as a calibration time. So for this calibration process, we have our friend Purple Elephant, who is a squeaky purple elephant toy that we squeak in different parts of the child's field of vision. And this allows us to, in post, create kind of some coordinates so we can see where the child is looking. And it allows us to sync up the image between the eye video as well as the scene video. So the blue lines indicated in the image on the right are the crosshair of these videos. And this allows us to see where that child is looking. So in terms of our data analysis, we have collected 34 out of our 48 participants so far. We have 24 for our neurotypical sample and 10 participants for our autistic sample. Looking further into that autistic sample, we have had 3 data collections where we were able to obtain eye tracking data from the child and 7 where we unfortunately were not able to get that eye tracking data. So in terms of our data analysis, we are looking at how the children are playing with these toys. Are they playing with them imaginatively? Are they engaging in functional play, where they're engaging with the toy in the way that it was intended, but not necessarily in an imaginative way? Are they engaging in sensory motor play, which is kind of just touching the toy, but not using it in its intended way? And then we are also looking at patterns of attention. So what toys are they touching? How long are they touching them? What toys are they looking at? How long are they looking at them? As well as the vocalizations. So this is the frequency of the frequency of their vocalizations, as well as duration of vocalizations, things like that. So for the implications of our study, this is a very exploratory study and we are still in the discovery phase for it. So we're still processing our findings. As a whole, there isn't much data on children's medical play as a whole. So our study is helping to bridge that gap for both autistic and neurotypical medical play. And our eventual goal is to inform and identify those play strategies that parents and caregivers can use for their children to make their autistic children more comfortable with medical materials. Any questions?
I inferred that your focus was on children being comfortable with medical devices or things that would be applied to themselves. But I'm wondering, is there any transfer there for if their parent was undergoing an illness, or it would help to prepare the child to be used to their caregivers themselves or parents to understand what's happening. So is there any literature on that, and is there some way you could adapt your experiments where it's not happening on the child themselves but on a caregiver?
Yeah, so medical play is a very broad thing. So many people in the child's life outside of themselves have to go to the doctor and go to these medical spaces, and the frequency of that may look different for a lot of different children. So if we're thinking about children's terms of processing these kind of scenarios that they may not be as familiar with, so our sample is looking at 3 to 5-year-olds, so obviously at that young age, any medical situation can be unfamiliar. So the entire goal is to reduce that medical stress for these children, not just for themselves, but just being comfortable in medical spaces in general. So there definitely would be those kind of transferable qualities where they would be able to just familiarize themselves with these experiences and understand that medical stress is something that many people deal with and that it's something that they don't have to be scared of.
Do most kids want to wear the eye tracker, and how do you deal with situations where the child does not want to wear the eye tracker?
Yes, so children between the ages of 3 and 5 are not exactly privy to wearing something that they may not be as comfortable with. So for how we try to get our kids to wear it as best as we can, because obviously we are not going to force the kids to wear the eye tracker if they do not want to. If they're not consenting to it, we're not going to force them to. So in order to get as much compliance as we can, we typically have the parents put on their set of headgear first to model for the children, so they are able to see what it looks like and see a familiar face wearing it. And then we put it on them, see if they're comfortable with it, kind of have them play around for a little bit and as we adjust it and see if they're comfortable with it and try to get compliance from there. We kind of use an analogy similar to if you're putting a snowsuit on a child, they may not want to wear it, but once it's on, they're probably okay with it. But if they truly are non-compliant with it, we are not going to force them to wear it.
When you're trying to measure how imaginative or tactile or other aspects of play, how it's changing, do you think that the presence of just like head-mounted eye tracking equipment changes the way that the child interacts with their toys? And is there a way that you're trying to address that, if at all?
Yeah, so a lot of the kids, honestly, once they begin to wear the head-mounted eye tracker, they don't really mind wearing it as a whole because there's toys around them. So they're incentivized to play with the toys in these different conditions, and it kind of just becomes another part of their life. So they aren't as averse to wearing it. It's just kind of a part of their norm for the next 30 minutes.